Time now to go to our political panel for the afternoon. And it's welcome to Matthew Lesh from the Institute of Public Affairs and Richard Dennis from the Australia Institute. My team didn't even make the finals, nor indeed did Matthew's. And Richard, you're lucky because you don't even have one. So coming from north of the Murray. So there we go. But yes, look, it was certainly an enthralling grand final, certainly for the first quarter, which I was able to see. And then, of course, I was in the studio, so I could not. But there we go. Sport and politics. Now, it may come as a surprise to some, but until this week, I had no idea who this person named Macklemore was, much to the chagrin of my younger daughters, who, they tell me, have been playing his songs for years and years and like him very, very highly indeed. I was just wondering to you both whether either of you have any objection to the idea, first of all, of the NRL inviting Macklemore to perform at the NRL Grand Final tomorrow night, or indeed knowing that one of his most popular songs is something of an anthem to same-sex marriage. Any objections, Matthew?
Look, not particularly. The NRL is a private sport organisation. They can, of course, choose whoever they like to perform at their grand final, and they can choose whether they like to play whatever songs they like. In fact, I think Australian political dialogue would be much better if politicians generally stay out of trying to influence footy and sport. If we can leave this just to be a sacred field in which everyone can all get together rather than putting divisions into sport, I think everyone could have a much happier time on the weekend.
Well, good luck to you in trying to keep politicians either away from the North Melbourne Grand Final breakfast in Melbourne on the morning before an AFL Grand Final, or indeed for their opportunity to get booed at the NRL Grand Final when the Cup is presented sometime later on tomorrow night. But to you, Richard Dennis, it was interesting, was it not, to see something of a division among those on the no side of the argument about Macklemore. Corey Bernardi utterly unfussed. On the other hand, Tony Abbott completely, not I was going to say nonplussed, but very, very angry about this notion at all. You're surprised that he should have used this as yet another attempt to prosecute the no case?
Look, I don't think anything Tony Abbott said should surprise anybody anymore. I mean, you know, the guy who signed Australia up to the Paris commitments is now the guy saying they're reckless. The guy that gave us the renewable energy target we've got's now saying that's what's causing all of our problems. And the guy that was recently raging on about freedom of speech and freedom of expression now wants politicians to tell, private organisations which acts to book for their big events. So look, it makes no sense at all, but then again, that seems to be Mr Abbott's current strategy.
And Matthew, who do you think's more in touch, Tony Abbott or his daughter Frances, who was delighted to see the news that Macklemore had been invited to the NRL Grand Final, and when she posted late in the week, she just suggested that when he performs tomorrow, should simply go harder.
Well, I mean, I think they're both in touch with different sections of Australian society. Obviously, there's a bit of an age difference between Tony Abbott and his daughter, and I think the fact that she's shown herself to be quite a strong, independent political actor is something that hopefully Tony Abbott's quite happy about.
Indeed. Richard Dennis, what's your sense of where this is heading at the moment? There's no doubt about it, in my point of view, that the no campaign has been very disciplined indeed and has been able to have some pretty solid standard bearers, particularly John Howard. And whatever the young may or may not remember about John Howard, he's going to be attractive to older cohorts of the population. On the other hand, you've got on the other side Malcolm Turnbull playing a pretty minor role, but nonetheless Bill Shorten and the Prime Minister are both pretty unpopular and don't attract much support in the community in any event. But do you think that's a real problem for the yes case?
Look, I think, you know, the no case are better organised for a number of reasons, the main one being they're the ones that wanted this plebiscite. They're the ones that have pushed for it for a long time. They're the ones that demanded we have it. And then, of course, having got the plebiscite they wanted on same-sex marriage, they've shifted the debate entirely away from the question they wanted into every other question they felt like talking about. So, yeah, it doesn't surprise me that the no campaign has got some heavy hitters out there and has a disciplined campaign, that they've been planning this for a couple of years. But of course, it's not just the Prime Minister and opposition leader supporting the Yes campaign. It's virtually every elected leader in Australia, and that reflects, of course, the fact that the vast majority of the population supports the Yes campaign. So the no campaign strategy is clearly to muddy the waters, to take people's enthusiasm out of voting for a simple proposition and to make it a complex and nasty one. You know, they're working hard on this strategy, and whether or not they prevail in this vote or not, they're not going to help Australia, the Australian public, or the Australian Parliament move forward. So even if they win the ballot, which the polls suggest they won't, I think they're just going to cause even more harm for their side of politics.
I do want to get off this topic and move on to some other things. But Matthew, before we do, just how important and how significant and influential do you think these third-party endorsements, which are overwhelmingly in support of same-sex marriage, whether it be from sporting bodies like the AFL or the NRL, or indeed from major corporations, the banks and Qantas, for example, do you think they genuinely do have influence, or is it simply a bit of icing on the cake?
Probably is icing on the cake. I think what we saw for President Trump's election is that Hillary Clinton had every endorsement from everyone in Hollywood. If you look at Brexit, every major economic or a lot of major economic organisations advise against it. I think people are independent enough to make the decisions they want to make without necessarily taking lead from these companies.
Fair enough. Let's move on to another big issue during the week, which was the question of energy. The Prime Minister called in and had another meeting with the gas suppliers, got a commitment from them about the quantity of gas that would be available to ensure, they said, that there would be no shortages come this summer. Richard Dennis, do you think that the gas suppliers will be as good as their word?
Look, their words don't mean a lot. Their words 10 years ago, when they started to cause this problem, were that this problem would never arise. Now, let's be clear, this problem might have snuck up on the politicians, but it didn't sneak up on the gas industry. The gas industry spent $60 billion building these three gas trains, 6 gas trains, 3 plants up in Gladstone, with the specific purpose of driving up the domestic price of gas. They told their shareholders that, they told the investment analysts that. They've been working on this plan for a long, long time. Now, back almost 10 years ago, the Queensland government and others started to say, how do we make sure there's enough gas there for manufacturing electricity? And the gas industry said, relax, there'll be plenty. Now, of course, those promises ring hollow. The prices have gone through the roof. And of course, the gas industry, which has caused this problem, is now saying, well, the only solution is to let us frack under more farms that don't want it in more states that don't want it. Now, I don't blame them for trying, but let's be clear, Australia has never ever produced anywhere near the quantity of gas we're producing at the moment. The only reason we have a shortage is because the gas industry sold all of it overseas. So they've caused this problem. It took 10 years to cause it. It took 10 years to build these enormous export facilities. They spent $60 billion causing this problem, and now they want to blame everybody but themselves.
Matthew, the government was very pleased getting the commitment on the terms on the question of supply, particularly for the coming summer, where AEMO, the Energy Market Organisation, had been warning that there could be shortfalls. But isn't the key question for consumers one of price? And isn't that still a vulnerability for this government? Because there may be the supply there this summer, but there will be no price relief.
I think we have to be absolutely clear here about what the issue is in our energy market, and it is a consistent failure of government policy. It is a failure in pushing out power stations like Hazelwood and Northern Power Station in South Australia that have meant that we don't have the necessary baseload energy from traditional sources, and as a consequence of that, there's been more demand put on the gas market. Now, this is a complex policy trilemma where we're trying to get clean energy, cheap energy and reliable energy. Right now, rather than actually achieving any of those goals, we're achieving none of them. Quite frankly, we have an absurd building of government intervention upon government intervention in this market, and it has been an absolute disaster. And this latest government intervention won't achieve anything more than the previous ones until we can actually get rid of the renewable energy target that is pricing out affordable energy for all Australians.
Look, I just want to turn in the brief time we've got left to one other issue, which was the departure from the ABCC, the Building and Construction Commission, of its head, that is Mr Hatchkis, who was fined $8,500 in court, something like $400,000 in legal expenses, which will be borne by the taxpayer. Matthew, I'll stick with you on this. This is not a good look, is it, for a government which is trying to pin all sorts of excesses on the unions, to have the head of the organisation designed to bring the Building and Construction Union to heel leave in this way, and found guilty of having breached the law?
It's absolutely not a good look. And I think it's perhaps a sign for both sides of politics to be very sceptical about organisations like the ABCC that are inquisitive in their judicial style. I mean, it's a kind of similar situation in the New South Wales Anti-Corruption Commission. These organisations become a life unto their own, and they very much need to be reeled in by government. And it's really not, I believe, a correct method on which to deal with these issues. Now, there clearly are rule of law issues in the building construction industry. The CFMEU has paid millions upon millions of fines after they have clearly broken the law again and again. And I can understand why the government reinstituted ABCC to deal with that. But at the same time, obviously, that organisation needs to be very judicial in the way it operates and not inquisitive in style.